Violence erupts in a quiet residential street.
There are hammers, axes, lumps of wood. It was a pack of wolves essentially attacking.
It was just horrific.
A teenager has been fatally stabbed.
I couldn't handle seeing my son lying dead. I just wanted to know who'd done it.
Forensics must act fast to find crucial evidence at the crime scene.
It's really important to be able to identify the murder weapon.
The team will do everything they can to bring that person in front of a court.
Police units are racing to a mass brawl in Eltham. Witnesses claim more than a dozen people, armed with weapons, are fighting in the street and attacking cars. DCI Simon Harding and his major crime unit cover this area of South London.
That call describes complete mayhem. Real sort of carnage happening in a very, very quiet, nice residential area.
When police arrive, the suspects have already fled.
First of all, what you could see was that there was a hammer in the roadside, next to some broken glass, with a lump of wood that had been torn off the fence. There were bricks, a wing mirror of a car, discarded weapons on the floor, but no victims, no suspects.
Officers immediately seal off the street.
Maintaining a crime scene and its integrity is difficult in certain types of weather. You can find those obvious exhibits, but then there are things that are very difficult to see in the dark, like blood.
Sarah Thurkle has 30 years' experience in the field and is one of the UK's leading forensic trainers.
The first rule of a CSI at a crime scene is to establish a cordon and a common approach path. They would have cordoned off a huge area to preserve any evidence that might have been dropped as the offenders were fleeing the scene. You've got passers-by that might pick up items that you've not seen because it's dark. Footprints might not be preserved properly. Photography in low light would take quite a long time to do. It's a very, very difficult scene for any crime scene manager to control. There was hammers, bits of wood, bricks, etc. These would have been a priority to try and get the maximum DNA evidence from them. And initially, they might not appear to be a weapon of choice to assault somebody with. So as a crime scene manager, you have to try and prioritise what you think might be a weapon.
An update comes through from the local A&E department.
One of the pieces of information that comes in is that potential victims that are at hospital, 2 boys have been stabbed.
The stabbed victims are 18-year-olds, Charlie Pamphlet and Jay Sewell.
I was just about ready to go to bed. And then a knock on the door came and I thought it was Jay. And I opened the door and his friend Alfie was standing there and he just said that Jay had been stabbed. He's been stabbed, but he's all right, he's stable. And at that actual point, I remember that I did collapse to the ground and said, thank God.
Jay's mother Sharon and her 2 younger children rushed to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital.
When we went into the A&E, I went up to the counter and I just said, Jay Sewell. And then with that, I was immediately ushered through to the back, and it was sort of there that the police were. And me and the Jake and Chloe, we were sort of like ushered into this little box room. I knew then. I knew.
Sharon's worst fears come true. Her son Jay has been murdered.
Chloe Jake just broke down, and I felt sorry. I felt sorry that I'd put them right in the front line of it all. Me, I was just shouting. I just wanted to know who'd done it, what had happened. I said they were going to clean him up so I could see him, but I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle seeing my son lying dead.
Jay's friend Charlie is in a critical condition. A murder investigation is launched.
When a teenager is killed in London, it's one of those things that really sparks sadness in a lot of people, because people in the prime of their life are having it taken away, and always needlessly.
There's 2 people been stabbed, we know that, and 1 has died, but we don't know who's done it.
Jay's body is taken to the mortuary for a post-mortem examination.
Jay becomes a crime scene, and so he will undergo a number of tests himself, and some of them are incredibly intrusive, and post-mortems are the most intrusive of all. But these are necessary things that a person unfortunately has to go through for us to be able to get the best possible evidence to find the person ultimately that killed them.
He had to have 2 autopsies. They did try to sort of make it where he could be viewed, but it was too distressing.
Detectives learned that Jay died from a single stab wound to the chest.
Knowing that they caused the death with a stab wound, the priority is to try and find that knife.
The CSIs continue to search the extensive crime scene, and detectives at the hospital question witnesses, including Jay's girlfriend Gemma, who drove him away from the attack site.
The story started to unravel very quickly. She gave a story around an ex-boyfriend being involved, along with a number of other people. There was possibly up to 12 people involved. When you've got so many people, it's very complex to start with. You need to know who they are and get them as quickly as possible. I have to understand the role that every single one of those people played within that murder.
"18-year-old Jay Sewell has been murdered. His friend Charlie remains in a critical condition. Jay's girlfriend drove them away from the crime scene to the hospital and claims they were set upon by a large gang led by her jealous ex-boyfriend.
She gave a story around a boy she named as Daniel Grogan being involved. What we weren't getting straight away was who stabbed Jay Sewell.
With that many suspects, it's a time-critical part of your investigation, because they've got time to start to dispose of evidence, getting their stories in some form of shape to try and help each other out or help themselves as individuals.
Witnesses tell police that some of Grogan's relatives were amongst the gang. In the middle of the night, a specialist team surrounds the family home.
We know that there are hammers, axes being talked of, lumps of wood. What we're doing at that stage is bringing in those people who can deal with large-scale arrests of people that are potentially violent. And that's when the Metropolitan Police's Territorial Support Group are called to effect an arrest in the early hours of the 12th.
The Grogan house is close to the attack site. Armed police are in position, ready to make the arrests.
The family were called out of that address by loudspeaker, one by one. Torches are lighting up the front door. Tasers are trained on each one as they come out. All the red dots are there ready. Out of the house came mum, dad, sister, sister's boyfriend. Some of them are quite nervous. Mum comes out shaking.
The mother is 55-year-old Anne Grogan. Witnesses at the crime scene claim she was seen carrying a knife. The father, 58-year-old Robert Grogan, was alleged to have swung an axe. The sister is 30-year-old Francesca Grogan, and her partner is 32-year-old Jamie Bennett. Both were identified to be holding hammers, concealed in towels.
What we didn't have was Daniel Grogan or somebody else that had been named, Charlie Dudley. And we knew still that there was potentially more people involved.
At the police station, clothing from the suspects in custody is seized.
If the suspects are arrested within a few hours of the crime being committed, it may well be that they have trace evidence on them. For example, blood or fibres on their clothing. So it's really important that this evidence is recovered as soon as possible. Fingernail scrapings and fingernail cuttings would be taken. If there's any injuries to the hand or any obvious blood on someone's hands, that would be swabbed. And then if they don't have a DNA record, a DNA sample is taken. And this is referred to as the reference DNA sample, to be able to potentially link that back to either the victim or the crime scene.
At the forensic lab, scientists compare the suspect's DNA samples against the haul of weapons seized from the crime scene, whilst the detectives begin the interview process.
Every single one of them said nothing. It's clear that there has been conversation to not say anything. So you're working off nothing from the suspects at all. And that's when you look at all the other things that build up your investigation.
The morning after the attack, police allocate further resources to the crime scene.
It's very, very important to visit the scene, understand it. What is the area around it? What's the infrastructure like? Look at CCTV options yourself and just make sure that you know your officers are doing what they're supposed to be doing with the CCTV retrieval. So this is where Jay Sewell was stabbed, and where he was actually stabbed took place back there towards that last fence in the road. That's where the huge melee took place.
Officers would be going door to door, trying to identify people that might have seen or heard something that evening. Some people have CCTV, some is working, some is not. Some CCTV is not facing the right direction, but it can be relevant if it sees somebody making off in a certain way.
While Simon's team scour the area for CCTV, detectives interview Jay's family.
Yeah, he got on with everybody. Very happy boy, happy-go-lucky.
He always used to be at pies. That's where he made all his friends. Pies. He had so many friends. It's ridiculous.
Girls always warmed to him, and he'd walk into a bar and he'd walk out with 2 or 3 of them. He's your typical lad.
He was quite a good-looking boy, so, the girls used to like him a lot.
Police learn that on Friday the 7th of December 2018, just 4 days before his murder, Jay started seeing a girl named Gemma.
I think it was through one of his friends, just in the pub. I think they had a few drinks together and just went from there.
I saw very briefly that Gemma. I didn't have the story. I didn't know. I'd just seen this girl